Hello and welcome back to another episode of CamBro Conversations. And today's conversation, we are talking all things online business, software, fitness, and even a little bit of investing. To do so, we are joined by Nick Walsh. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Colin. Thank you for the intro. That was good.
Well, pride myself on trying to be quite fluent for some of the conversation. The rest of the time, I might talk a lot of nonsense, Nick, so we'll start well if we can do. But for the listeners that aren't familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure, yeah. So I guess my main background is in running gyms. I started a gym called the Performance Project with two other directors. That was kind of my first hit in the industry. I worked in and around the gym for a while, and then decided to step away from there and move more towards online coaching. In the meantime, I've worked with a few startups and things like that, but my main income source now, or what I do day to day, is based around online coaching.
Yeah, and I think previous guest in the podcast, Harry Ransom, was one of the gents that was involved with you at the Performance Project, and that's maybe how I came across you alongside you being on Ro Anwar's podcast back in the day as well.
Yeah, two good lads there. Yeah, so Harry was one of the directors. He's one of my best mates as well. So I learned a lot from that guy. He's a good guy.
Yeah, his episode on this was really interesting. He was, you know, how he's so into his studies. He was very much citing how he can break that down for the average client, which I think is so valuable because I'm sure you've seen through your years in the industry, you do get a lot of pseudoscience. So when somebody actually does know the information, they can still come with too much info. And Harry has that nice balance where he comes and delivers it in his southern accent, and you're like, right, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, they say, don't they, you don't know a subject unless you can explain it in the simplest form. And Harry absolutely nails that. And I think actually, whilst we're on this subject, that's probably one of the reasons why our initial business, the Performance Project, did so well, because Harry had the intelligence and the education in that area. And then Jerome, the other founder, was a really hard worker. He'd just get down to the grit and work really hard. And I would be the people person. And that's kind of the fundamentals of the business. And it worked really well whilst we were there. So
yeah, that was down in Brighton, wasn't it? And then you moved primarily online when you exited that business, and that's been the focus ever since.
That's correct. Yeah. So I think that was back in 2017. I'm awful with times, especially after this year. Everything's just merged. But yeah, so that's when I stepped into online coaching. Yeah.
And there was a little bit of a time when you were involved with the tech startups. You mentioned that. I think for those kind of non-fitnessy listeners, I'm sure they'll be very interested to find out what was going on there. And I know it was fitness related, but what was the first startup you were involved with?
Sure. So, I mean, I've given myself a brief intro. I'll dive right back a little bit more. So before I started the Performance Project, I worked for a magazine company working in sort of marketing and magazine subscriptions. I got into nutrition mainly through my own training. I was enjoying training myself, following that lifestyle, and became interested in what was going on. Started doing online coaching whilst I was still working my employed job at the magazine company. And then came across Harry and Jerome at my local gym, and we kind of formed a friendship and decided to set up the Performance Project. We did that for a while. It started off as a personal training based gym, and then we expanded it to become more of a private facility, moved to a larger premises where we had personal training on the top floor and kind of more of a gym on the downstairs floor. After a while, we decided to separate and do our own thing. And I decided that I wanted to do something different because I'd always been interested in tech. I taught myself to code at home, and I knew that I had a good fundamental business background that I thought would work well within a startup. So when I left the Performance Project, I thought, right, okay, what path do I want to go down? I'd done a little bit of online coaching. I had that backing there. So I was always doing online coaching, no matter what. It would always be there next to me. And then I decided to venture into London, and actually became head of operations for a startup that was called Vita. And the concept behind this business was that it was almost like Uber for personal trainers. So somebody could be in an office or in their home and think, I want an hour's personal training session. And they could go onto the app, request a trainer with skills in something they wanted to do. It could be like yoga, it could be HIIT, it could be strength. And then the concept was that we would run a personal training session in the space for yoga mat. And so I did that for a while. Didn't get on with it too well. I think I struggled with being employed and some of the concepts and and ideas of the original founder I didn't quite agree with. So I decided to step away from it, fell back on online coaching a bit more, and then started pushing in towards e-commerce, running some e-commerce stores. And you're going to laugh at this, everybody does, but I ran an e-commerce store selling dog toys for a while.
Okay.
Something that was close to my heart because I've had dogs in the family for a while, alongside my online coaching. And although I laugh at it now, and it was quite a successful business whilst I was doing it, it taught me so much. It taught me so much about email marketing, about Facebook ads, YouTube ads, and so many different sections of the online world, really. And now I've managed to merge that with online coaching, and it's been a pretty cool journey, to be honest.
Yeah, I love how much there is to that, Nick. And the first of those that made me laugh was that you were like, "Oh, I learned to code at home," and that's the kind of famous phrase that's chucked around, particularly in America, I think, where they're like, "Oh, don't know what you're going to do in the future. Learn to code." And I think it is, and I think it will continue for a little while anyway to be a valuable skill, because if you understand that back end of a business, you can be quite a valuable asset. And I'm sure that was maybe a factor in you being recruited as head of ops for Vita. However, you've spoken to me before about some of the challenges you had there. The concept sounds excellent, doesn't it? In terms of Uber for personal training, people love convenience. They maybe don't want the contracted nature of coaching sometimes. So that kind of one-off sounds really great. What were the key challenges and what did you learn from those?
I think when I started the job, it was myself and the founder. So he had the idea. He had a lot of money behind him. He's quite a successful person. I won't mention any names for obvious reasons, but he's been well known for running other businesses in the past. And he didn't really have much knowledge in the industry that we were about to move into, so the fitness industry or personal training as a whole. And he needed somebody that did have the experience, and that's where I came in. The only issue with that was that I had the experience, but he had the ideas. And where his ideas met my knowledge and my experience didn't really join, because he would say certain things or suggest certain ideas, and I would say, well, that's not going to work. And I think the first lesson I learned was that if you are going to be a founder, you need to be in the dirt first. You need to be able to do the thing that you're going to do, because this guy was sending out personal trainers with a concept of running these personal training sessions without having tested it himself. So really, he should have been the person there doing the sessions to see what was working, to see what equipment was needed, to see how people perceived the actual service. But unfortunately, because he didn't have the experience, he wasn't doing that. So I guess that was a huge lesson, and creating a minimum viable product, an MVP, for any sort of service or product you're making, especially if it's an app, because fundamentally you need to know that the service is actually going to work. And that was something that he hadn't done. He spent a lot of money on the product, but didn't actually test it first. And I left, but I would assume that was what the downfall of the actual business was.
Yeah, valuable lessons there. And equally, because somebody's been successful in one sector, as this founder has done, going into a new area, albeit with some excellent skills, some bright, vibrant ideas. But like you say, sometimes not knowing what the shop floor workers are doing, so to speak, if you were looking at it in a traditional factory sense, can be really challenging. And away from podcasting, I've worked in the insurance industry for a long time now. And when we speak to large family businesses, you quite often find that the MD, the owner, he has done every job throughout the business in order to understand what it looks like. Now, things have evolved over time due to technology. Maybe he's in his 60s now, but he has a good idea of what the person on the lowest pay is doing, all the way up to the FD that sits next to him in the boardroom. And his ability to understand that is extremely valuable when it comes to running things. And that's not just for a startup, that's for a corporate business that turns over tens, hundreds of millions. So I think it's a really valuable message that, yes, you can be this blue sky thinking entrepreneur, like bring me solutions, not problems, Nick. But if he doesn't quite understand the nuance, then it's never going to fall.
You're exactly right. And I think it's understanding the concepts of the business. And from what you just said, you just need to be able to spot the mistakes, and you can't spot the mistakes if you're sat in an office away from where everything's going on. I think you're very right there.
Now, you took these lessons forward, as you said, and the main focus is the online coaching. You've got the e-commerce with the dog toys, which brought a little bit of a giggle.
Yeah.
But ultimately, as a dog owner, importantly, you understand what's necessary there. So at least you've had you've had a horse in the race, so to speak. But you've also got this AI bot that you're building from a software perspective. At what stage is that now, and where's that going?
So we're still in very early stages. Unfortunately, due to the craziness that we had last year, it's been a lot slower than I would have liked. But the concept is that it's an AI form of an online coach. So people can install it into Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. They can check in with the bot. So it would ask some questions on their standards. The standard questions really like your activity, your height, your general stats. And then it'll ask you how often you're training and things like that. And then it will give you some targets to hit. And then every Monday you check in with it as though it's a coach. It will ask you how your stress levels are, how your sleep levels are, and it will track all of this stuff. And it uses that information to create you some new targets. And then throughout the week, it will check in with you saying how you're doing, is there anything you need help with. And so the concept of it is to basically help people either gain muscle or lose fat. But we're also pushing a huge part of it being towards mental health, so improving people's mental health. And if someone ticks the red flag, so they're saying that they're not getting enough sleep, they're feeling quite low, their stress is high, they're not losing any weight, they're losing motivation, then this will tick a lot of flags, and it will actually be alerted. It'll send a red flag alert to someone, a human, that can actually get in touch with them and speak to them if they need it. So it's got all these different plays on it, but unfortunately, due to the craziness that we had last year, I've had to kind of concentrate more on my online coaching, just making sure my one-to-one clients are supported. But hopefully now things are kind of going back to normal. We should be able to expand it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting concept, just given it's maybe an entry-level service for a lot of people to get that online support from a coach that's somewhere between your gym floor PT and your top level online coach that you would hold yourself up as with your one-to-one business.
Yeah, definitely.
Filling that void, so to speak. And yeah, I'll be interested to keep tabs on how that moves forward. And I'm sure, as you said, one of the key lessons you've learned is having a minimum viable product, which is the app works and it functions and it has these different tools. So around diet and training, but then the kind of maybe the bonus is the mental health and the well-being. And equally, you tick the box that you've been in the trenches. You know what an online coach and what an online coaching bot should be doing if it's delivering.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, I mean, I think being a coach and having handled lots of clients and helped lots of clients, it's easy to create a product and predict what's going to happen next. I think you know the stages of a diet, you know what a client's thinking, you know what they're going to do or expect to happen. And so you can create something that is going to help them. Obviously it's not going to be perfect, but 90% of the time, and at least be able to guide them in a way that can ensure they keep progressing.
Yeah, makes total sense to me, Nick. The main focus has been the fitness business, and you certainly leveled up during 2020, despite, as you said, the craziness going on around us. And you worked with Propane Fitness, who many of the listeners will be familiar with, Johnny and Yusuf from Modern Wisdom. And that's really taken you to another level. What have been some of the big learnings from actually having a coach to be a coach, so to speak?
I mean, props to those guys, because they've really turned my business around, and they're great guys as well. So for your listeners, if you haven't checked out their stuff, I definitely recommend it. But some of the key learnings, I mean, because I was coaching back when I was running the Performance Project, and I knew I was okay at it. I was getting results, but a lot of my systems were stuck in that age. And so I was getting clients from the gym, and I'll get people through social media and things like that. But my back end wasn't as strong as it could be. My front end was great. My advertising was cool, everything like that. But there's certain things that was falling behind on the back end. And I knew that, and I knew I had to spend some time to focus on it. And I just needed someone that was just going to say, look, this is what you need to do. Go away and do it and come back. And their principles are basically just focus on one thing, get it done, and then come back and focus on it. And there's a concept that Johnny actually introduced to me, and it's stuck with me. He has something called the 1 hour rule.
Okay.
Where you wake up in the morning and you just do 1 hour of the thing that means the most to your business, so the thing that's gonna make you grow. And I mean, it sounds super simple, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be thinking, well, that sounds really easy to do. But honestly, like, I think we prioritize things that we think are important in our heads, but aren't actually that important. So for example, I don't know, I might get an email from a client and I think, okay, that client wants to hear back from me as quickly as possible. So that goes to the first of my list, when really it should be the thing that's going to help my business grow that goes to the first of my list. So doing that 1 hour rule has been huge for my business. Like just working for 1 hour, deep work, headphones in, black coffee, and just cracking on for an hour. It's been massive. But they've introduced various concepts, like various funnels, advertising techniques. We're talking about podcasts and things like that at the moment. So yeah, they've been great, and it just proves to me that I think coaches do benefit from having coaches. I mean, you hear about it all the time, but it's definitely true. Just having that accountability factor, it's been really good, especially in the lockdown.
Yeah, first things first on the 1 hour rule. I really, really like that principle. And sometimes we don't need these really sexy, incredible, like new habits to turn us around. It does need something to be simple, like the priority principle of, will this make the boat go faster? Great. Then it goes further up the list. And I think for anyone that's working in a corporate job, your first hour of the day in the office, like your willpower is at its highest, typically your energy levels at its highest. I look to try and do my like hardest tasks then, so to speak. So like maybe my outbound calls to prospects, or I'll do like my deep research on a business where I kind of don't really want to be distracted. I want to understand like what's the risk profile like, or what are they up to at the moment, what's happening in the news around them. And then from a coaching perspective, like you say, you could easily get bogged down in administrative tasks like, oh, such and such has emailed me to say, can we move our call from Thursday at 10 till Thursday at 11? And you're spending 5 minutes going into the Zoom invite and moving it around, when really you should be focused on something a bit more meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I was finding was I was taking those tasks that didn't really need to be done and putting them at the top of my list. And it's almost like a subtle form of procrastination that you don't realize you're doing. You're thinking, oh, I am working because I'm working on these tasks that need to be done. But actually, you're pushing back the tasks that you don't really want to do. The tough tasks, like you say, the harder tasks, and the ones that are actually going to help you grow the most. And they kind of slide down the list. So just about taking those, putting back up the top, doing 1 hour of them, and then moving on to the other tasks later on. It's been really good.
I think it's an excellent concept. The only time I flip it on its head is if I try to go into that hour or that period of focus work and it's just not happening for me. That's the only time that I try and generate momentum from smaller tasks. So I try and tick off some of the menial bits in the to-do list, and I'm like, right, okay, I'm having a better day than I would have done. Whereas I think sometimes you can get lost in the big task and not really work your way through it. Maybe you're getting distracted, whatever it is. And then you're like, fuck, that's been a total failure of a morning. So sometimes I generate momentum, but 9 times out of 10, I would always favor eat the frog, or whatever term you want to use. The hard thing first.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting way of doing it, because I guess sometimes you do feel like you're over forcing it, and you can only really play what's in front of you. If you're just not working and it's not going right for you, then you've got to do something else, haven't you? So I think that concept's quite good. The other one's Pomodoro technique.
Yeah.
With the 30 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And I mean, that I'd kind of tend to do that throughout the day anyway, but that's another good technique.
Yeah, I heard them discuss that on Modern Wisdom with Chris, and he's a big proponent of like productivity and focus. And I certainly found that an interesting one for when I was studying for some of my insurance diploma exams, like a 25-minute segment and then 5 minutes off. The only thing was I started to try and make the 5 minutes off not on screens, because the 5 minutes on Instagram is never 5 minutes on Instagram, as you probably.
That's very true. Very true. I suppose you need to do your 25 minutes and then 5 minutes off walking around. They say try and look out the window, don't they? Was it Chris that said that on this podcast, to try and rest your eyes a little bit from the screen?
Yeah,
I think that seems like a sensible move.
Yeah. So the other thing you mentioned was funnels and systems. Now, these are like the really unsexy parts of business. Again, like you say, like I've got a 1 hour rule in the morning where I get lots of my work done. People are like, yeah, but like, what about like, yeah. So like I rub my tummy and pat my head at the same time, and I assign 3 more clients. That's what people want to hear, isn't it? But what kind of funnels and systems are we talking? Is it a lot about when people come in, the kind of messages they're getting and how you're moving them further down the process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so obviously you've got your various funnels that are like email funnels or marketing funnels and stuff. But the main concept they teach, without giving away all their secrets, is a 14-day challenge. So you run a challenge which you invite people onto. So through your email list, through social media, through live streams or whatever it may be, webinars. And then they move through a challenge, which could be like 14 days to lose fat. And in this point there, you're giving them videos or tasks to do through this challenge, and they're getting to know a bit more about you all the way through. So you're turning a cold lead into a hot lead or warm lead through this process. And then at the end, you sell your offer and promote your service. So, I mean, that's been the key thing. And in terms of systems, the key thing I've learned from them is that you want to turn your business into more of a flywheel. And so you don't want to be spending more time if you're getting another client. So everything is set in place. So if you get a new client, they're all ready to go. Because before, I was just be spending 2 or 3 hours setting up a client when they come into the business. Whereas now everything's ready to go. I play around with a few things to tailor it, but everything is pretty much in place. I hit play and they get a thread of emails, and it's all just made super easy.
Yeah, and that's the scalability piece, isn't it? Because otherwise, like you say, you may be limited to have 50, 20, 25, 30 clients or whatever, whereas this enables you to build up, obviously, the amount of tailoring based on who the individual is and what they've said in their questionnaires and all that kind of stuff. But that's the exciting part, where there's not the same limits put in place on you based on your IT and your tech.
Absolutely. I mean, before, like my targets would always be to stay around 30 online clients. But this year, so 2021, I'm hoping to hit 100 clients, 120 clients. And having the systems in place for that has just made it so much easier.
Yeah, so that's exciting. And speaking of all these clients that you're looking to support, you've said that you're in the trenches with them during this gym closure period. Maybe by the time this comes out, we'll finally have had some sensibility and we'll be reopened. But during the kind of 2020, 2021, you have very much been in the trenches. What do you mean by that, Nick?
So, I mean, through the first lockdown, everything was just everywhere and everybody was struggling. And then we went into the second one, and the gyms opened up and they shut again. And by the time the third one came around in the UK, everybody's motivation was just dead. That's my clients and mine included. And I think I just thought, right, I can understand why my clients are struggling here. This is really hard. Like, dieting in a lockdown is tough. Like, nobody's seen each other. It was raining outside. It was still the winter. So no surprise that people's motivation was dropped. So I thought, well, okay, if my clients are doing this, then I want to do it alongside with them. And I didn't want to be a coach that was posting stuff online with all these dumbbells, all these barbells and stuff, because if my clients are doing hundreds of press ups a week and I'm there doing my dumbbell press with my bench and my squat rack or whatever, then it's going to be demotivating for them, because obviously you're going to make progress when you've got weights. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do it with them. So I've been doing a cut at the moment, just using body weight. And I say just body weight. I've got a pull-up bar. I'm using an exercise bike, and I've got some of those press-up handles, but I'm just using body weight as my load.
Yeah.
And so far it's been pretty good. I've got one more week of the cut, and then I'm going to stop for when the gyms reopen. But so far I'm feeling quite lean.
Yeah, I think that whole in the trenches piece, and like you say, I've seen a lot of coaches who will maybe have access to studios, or because it's their place of work, a lot of them can actually go into their gym and film like Zoom classes and stuff like that for their clients, which is fantastic. But ultimately, it means that they're not in the exact same position when it comes to their client doing mostly bodyweight stuff, maybe some resistance bands, maybe they've got one dumbbell or one kettlebell, whatever it is they've got access to. So I do think there's a lot of value to be had from you knowing what they're going through. And it maybe links back to that piece around when you were at Vita. Like, I want to know what it's like in order to kind of preach from my office.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worked in my benefit as well. Like, I've been able to record loads more exercise videos because I've been doing it anyway. So if we do go back into another lockdown, God forbid, then I've got even more exercises, and everything's kind of set up because I've done it. Like you just said, I've done it and I know what I need to get results for my clients. But I mean, I've been training since I was 16. So that's 14 years now. So just a quick math check. Yeah, that is 14 years. So I just thought a period away from weights isn't going to do me any harm. Like, I'd like to be able to see what my body actually does. And it's been interesting. And don't get me wrong, I'm really looking forward to squatting some weight again or getting under a bench press. And I think I mean, hopefully, because I've been away from the gym and not actually lifting any weights, the muscle growth is now going to be like a low hanging fruit that I can just grab at. But we'll see. I've enjoyed the process.
Yeah, because you, like you say, for those that haven't seen you before, you've got a significant amount of muscle mass built over that period. You're in excellent shape. It's a lot easier to hold on to muscle than it is to gain it. What do you think being in a deficit and doing your body weights looked like? Obviously, there's a good chance you've lost a little bit of muscle. You're maybe a little bit flatter. But
yeah,
what do you think it's been like from a body comp perspective?
It's been tough. It's been really hard to measure because my usual variables are obviously gone. Like, for example, when you're in a diet, you look at strength as a dictator to whether you're losing muscle mass or not. So if you're bench pressing, for example, and suddenly you can't hit the reps that you could before, you're thinking, okay, maybe I need to make some changes here because I'm losing mass. Whereas when you're doing body weight, it's tough because you're banging out hundreds of press ups and you're thinking, okay, I got less reps. Is that because I've not had a coffee? Is that because I'm feeling more tired? Is it because the sunshine is shining through the window? And there's so many different things because it's your body. It's just your body, and it's been really tough. But I actually did a refeed, so a high carb day the other day, just to kind of see where I was visually, just to see how I felt, because I felt like I was losing a lot of muscle. But I think that is just kind of a standard procedure when you're dieting, because you lose your glycogen storages and you just don't have that pump. So I did a high carb day and I did actually feel okay. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can tell I've lost a little bit of muscle, especially in my chest, because doing press ups is never going to compare to doing bench press or things like that. Yeah. But because I've had pull ups and because I've managed to utilize a lot of unilateral and single leg movements, I've not lost too much muscle in those areas, I don't think. It'll be interesting to see what happens when I'm back in the gym. But
yeah, I saw your photos after your refeed, and you were looking full, like you say. But you've over the years you've taken some like brilliant photos where you look massive and lean. So it'll be interesting to see how that maybe compares side by side at the end of your diet versus
So I think what I'll probably do is do a monthly update when I'm back in the gym and when I've lifted some weight, and just compare it to how I'm looking now, and maybe previous photos as well, just to see what the progress is like and how different my body looks.
That'll be an interesting process to follow, I think, for anyone on Instagram. Equally, you mentioned there around bodyweight movements that have benefited you. Luckily, you've been using the pull-up bar. That's fantastic. But are there any bodyweight, like purely bodyweight movements that you would say have been like, actually, I'm getting quite a lot of bang for my buck here?
Yeah, I mean, outside of the obvious. So, I mean, obviously, you've got your press-ups and your pull-ups that are always going to stay in a plan. But I've utilized a lot more single leg movements. So the Bulgarian split squat, everybody hates it, I know, but it's been brilliant to hold mass, because especially for quads and glutes, it's been really, really good. And then I've been experimenting a lot more with planks and bird dogs. And I've always had, when I was younger, this is a funny story actually, you can blame Harry Ransom for this, but I was playing a game of horse. So have you ever heard of horse? Like the skateboard horse from the Tony Hawk days?
No,
So the concept with skateboarding was that you try and beat the person's trick. And so if you lost, you got H. And if you lost again, you got an O. And the idea was that you try not to get horse. Yep. And so me and Harry were playing horse with deadlifts. So we were trying to beat each other on a rep each time. Saying this now sounds absolutely ridiculous. But we'd be like, right, let's go heavier, or one more rep, and just try and beat each other. And I mean, playing games like that is never a good idea. And I actually did something to my back. And I mean, to this day, I don't know what it was, but it hurt for a few weeks. And every now and again, it tweaks. And so just doing body weight has been a real good way to strengthen that up. And I've been doing, I don't know if you've heard of the big three.
Yeah, Strip McGill.
Yeah, Strip McGill's big three. So side plank, bird dog, and then the supported crunches. So I've been doing those. But going back to your question before I wiggle off in a different direction, I would say bird dogs and planks have been huge in this lockdown.
Yeah, I find it so interesting that when you've maybe got a niggle or a little bit of a weakness somewhere in your body, often the way to fix them, yes, is loading and getting stronger, but it's also related to like being better with our body through movement. So bird dog is a prime example for that. For anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's effectively you're on all fours and you're reaching out with one side and your other leg's going backwards. and it's fantastic for stabilization through different ranges of motion. And if you're not good at that, then you probably haven't earned the right to deadlift really heavy in a game of horse. So
yeah. Definitely. And I think you definitely learn lessons like that, because I mean, because I've trained in the gym for a while, and most people go through the process of, you go in there, you do the machines, you do the beach workout, you do the pump stuff, and you look big and strong. But then if you play a game of rugby or someone pushes you, you go miles. And I think lessons like that, or exercises like that, really teach you where you're not as strong as you think you are. And they're very humbling. That's the word I was looking for, humbling.
Yeah, so there's definitely high quality bodyweight movements that should probably remain in a lot of people's plans that they've done during this lockdown. For me, hand release press ups was a big one. I've always had a decent dumbbell incline bench, but my flat barbell press was terrible since I stopped playing rugby. I had a lot of shoulder impingement issues. And doing hand release press ups where you were just actually going with no momentum, the pump I was getting initially in my chest when I was just doing these weights at home, I was like, this is wild. Like, I'm really connecting my chest here. This is an interesting one. I'd maybe leave it in as a warm up even.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for the listeners, those don't know. So hand release press up is where you're in a normal press up position. You go down, you put your chest on the floor, and then you raise your hands up, so you've got no momentum, and then you push your hands back down and power back up. And like Colin says, they really get your chest pumped, but they're great for power, and they show you how to like generate force as quickly as possible. And like I say, just getting rid of that momentum
is a nice one. It's maybe a nice one to leave in for those warm-up days. You also said there about understanding things better, and that links into one of the principles that I've seen you speak about before as fitness as a mental game. To what extent do you see fitness as a mental game, Nick?
So I guess fitness is quite a broad term, but if we narrow it down to, say, fat loss and muscle gain, I think everyone can eat well for a day, or everyone can do one good training session. But it's the people that can do the mundane tasks daily and consistently that always win. And so when you can be consistent and continue to be on your game when things around you are tough, like we've just seen last year, that is when you win. So it's that mental aspect of being able to continue and be consistent when the world around you is up in flames. So I think just being that continuing, I guess the word is, I don't know, just staying consistent, but being motivated to do it. And I think that's the best way to say it.
Yeah, like staying on a level that's your baseline consistently, that's a really strong mental position to be in. Whereas I think there's, like you say, there's peaks and troughs of people like, I'm smashing training this week. Yeah, great. But what about 3 weeks down the line where you've lost that initial hype and that drive? And I think like for you and I who've like been training for years and years and years, our ability to put up with relatively mundane tasks over and over again compounds. And we're going to talk about investing, I know, but that's an investment term, isn't it? Because it adds up. Like your ability to show up on a wet, cold Wednesday night for a similar push session that you did last week, but then try and beat your numbers or try and stimulate yourself and get up for it, and then go home and eat a meal that you've had countless times that meets your macronutrient requirements. That's not exciting. It's not sexy, like we were saying at the start in terms of the principles around you growing your online business. It's not like jump out of bed and wave your hands in the air and be like, yes, what an amazing change this is making. It's relentless consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've found this week, especially with this cut, is that through the first, say, 4 weeks, everything always feels a bit all over the place as you're trying to create a new routine and you're trying to put the habits in place. But I find that around week 4 or 5, I just hit this element of flow and everything just sticks. So my meals are the same, my working routines are the same, my training sessions are exactly the same. And then suddenly it just goes from being surface level in my mind to just being ingrained. And I'll wake up at a set time, I just do the thing and I'm not even having to think about it anymore. And that's when you're at that level, you can really succeed. And it's just getting past that initial period of where it's like walking into the sea. You're trying to get through the initial waves, but once you're actually in the sea, everything's a lot calmer. And I think when you get there, you can really excel.
That's an excellent analogy. And anyone that's listened to more than one of the podcasts will know that I love talking about habits. And that 4 weeks is often where you're building those ingrained habits. And I just wonder if more people would give themselves a chance to get through that period of inertia, whether they would the they reap the calmness of the sea, so to speak,
Yeah.
to go in line with your analogy. And they'd be like, actually, this isn't as bad once I'm in the flow of it.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think you're very right. Like that is where most people give up. They'll see the initial weight loss and they think, okay, great, I'm doing this, okay, and then things start to slow down, and people start to knock them off track, or people are ringing them up saying, do you want to go out, or whatever it may be. Obviously, in lockdown we've not had that, but Domino's is calling their name, and then before you know it, they're just off track and they're back to square one again. And it's you've probably seen that. The analogy or the picture on social media where the guy with the pickaxe is really close to his goal, but he gives up just before. And it's just like that. Most people are so close to where they need to be, but they just give up too soon.
Yeah, they're so close to building that habit where it become a lot more second nature to do the mundane things day to day. And speaking of something that's not so mundane, Nick, you have delved into the world of Twitter in the last little while, and it's been something that you've maybe found a bit more rewarding than the battle that is Instagram. Anyone that knows my opinions on Instagram nowadays, it's a lot less fun than it used to be, in my opinion. But Twitter seems to be a place where you get to go and be yourself. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's always been my preferred platform, and I've never known whether it's because of the way I am as a person or the way the platform's laid out, but I just prefer how you can have a genuine conversation on Twitter. I feel like on Instagram, it often feels like you're an artist and you just put your painting up in a museum and people are walking past it going, yeah, that's okay, or that's terrible. And no one's really discussing it, and they're just kind of going yes or no to it. Whereas with Twitter, you can put something out there and it can either be good or bad, but people will still discuss it. And sometimes you'll get some people that disagree with you, but that's fine. Like you can still have a conversation and you're still generating, I guess, content and ideas from other people. And I think that's really good as well, because a lot of time there's confirmation bias out there. And Twitter is a place where you will get called out if you're saying the same things consistently. There will be someone that says, no, I don't think that's right. And then you can be open to actually speaking to somebody about it and understanding their ideas on it. And you learn as well. And I just think it's a much better platform for, well, one, mental health, two, growth, and three, I mean, my business as a whole, it's been a lot better with Twitter.
Yeah, I find it interesting that both you and Ro have said to me that Twitter for your business is one of your main lead generators now.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons that is because it's so much easier to link through to email lists. Yeah. I mean, I don't have enough followers to have the swipe up on Instagram stories and stuff. So, I mean, take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt, because I don't delve straight into Instagram. But for me, if I'm tweeting something about fat loss and people are asking for more information, or if I've made a thread or muscle gain for whatever, you can end the thread or end the tweet with, if you'd like to find out more, sign up to my email list or download this ebook, and then people move onto your list. And then once you've got them on the list, as we know at the moment, social media is changing all the time, and it's important to have people on an email list so that you've got that tangible asset if something does change in the social media world.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that it's easier to get people off the platform to where you want them to be to speak to them on another level. And we'll go into an email list another time, but one of my close friends, Chris Burns, has been in the podcast as a copywriter for some leading fitness businesses, and the revenue that he drives through marketing emails is genuinely incredible because people are so engaged and he speaks them in the right tone and the right language, and it's been amazing to watch. But the fact that Twitter links into that a lot more easily than, like you say, the kind of pay to play platforms like Instagram, where you need 10,000 to do the swipe up, or you need to pay to get ads and reach in the same way that you might get on Twitter with a viral tweet. I find that very interesting. But you've had a couple of trolls on there as well, Nick. You don't get an awful lot, but when they do, they come with some banter, don't they?
Yeah, I've been getting attacked a lot recently. I mean, there's two types of trolls. I've been thinking about this. There's the troll that's obviously like a fake account, and then there's another sort of troll that's actually a person, but they're just there to give you a hard time. And I've brought up a concept recently where, for the ones that are actually people, I've been going onto their bios and looking at what they actually do, and just responding with compliments and just like saying nice stuff about them, trying to kill them with kindness as much as possible.
Yeah, I find that funny because quite often, like you say, even if they are a real person, they'll quite often have very limited info on on their profile. So it's probably hard for you to do that. And I've certainly found whenever I've had something maybe a bit unpleasant on Instagram, or somebody's trying to be directly confrontational off the back of nothing, which I'm sure you get with some of your tweets.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, I'm not really sure where to go with this, because your profile's got no posts. Like, yeah, you've got a profile photo and you've got a username and you follow some people and they follow you. So you are real, but
yeah,
you're not putting yourself out there. So there's nothing I can, and it's not that you would be going on there to pick fault with it. You're actually doing the opposite. You're going on there to be like, oh, it's really cool that you're involved with software design, or it's great that you're passionate about Forex or whatever it is they're passionate about.
That's a big one.
Well, quite often, isn't it? Those guys are quite opinionated.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's been 2 occasions recently where I've had someone that has given me a very hard time. So the first one was a person, and he was commenting on mine and propane fitness stuff, Yusuf's stuff, and is I don't know what his idea was behind it, but when you went onto his Twitter, I think what he was trying to do was piss people off that were talking about genuine nutrition stuff, and then get them to click on his profile and then go through to his blog. And his blog was a lot of like conspiracy theories, pushing a lot of veganism and why sort of everyday lifestyle is bad for us. And with those sort of guys, I like to go on there and just kind of try and like learn a little bit about them and trying to see what they're up to and compliment them if I can. But then the other guys, like I posted the other day, I was asking people about what was the best thing that happened to them that week, just trying to create a bit of a positive thread. And we're getting some really good stuff on there. Like people were saying they recovered from COVID, people were saying they'd had some business success. And then someone said, unfollowing your shit. And I replied saying, okay, fair enough, mate. I respect that. I'm not going to force you to follow me. I think it's quite good that you unfollow me if you're not enjoying my content. And he replied saying, okay, dickhead. And I was like, okay. So I just quote tweeted it, and I can't remember what I said now, but something a little bit sarky. And the rest of Twitter enjoyed it, I think.
Yeah, you've got to enjoy that for what it is at that point, because he's not looking to play ball. Even if you are just politely saying, all right, thanks, mate, see you later, he's still wanting to come back and have a last little dig. So you might as well just expose him to the audience. And
yeah, that's the thing. And I think most people, everyone like finds a troll quite funny now, like especially when it's like awful comebacks, like okay, dickhead. So if you retweet it or quote tweet it, the rest of Twitter quite enjoy it and kind of like latch onto it a little bit, and it almost works in my favor. So don't be a troll, because you actually help people out.
Something I'm interested in for a lot of online coaches, particularly as you've spoken about that 1 hour rule and maybe some of the priority principles. At what point does time on Twitter stop being classed as maybe lead generation and business generation and maybe become sunk costs or a waste of time? Do you have like a firm line?
Yeah. So, I mean, if someone was starting Twitter, what I would say to them is use software. So I use something called Hyped Fury or things like that to actually schedule your tweets. Because otherwise, if you're going on there all the time to tweet, you're going to spend a lot of time on the platform. So think ahead, create some tweets. Like my shower time, I just think of so many tweets. I jump out the shower and I'm like noting all these things down, and then schedule them. So I schedule them every Friday for the week ahead. And then so they're going to go out at certain times. And you need to be making sure they're going out on different time frames as well. It's not just UK time frames, American time frames and stuff as well. But then when you are going on Twitter, you're going on to speak to people or to kind of reply to comments and stuff. So it takes a lot less time because your tweets are already going out. And so you can dedicate maybe half an hour or twice a day or something like that, just to go on, reply to people, chat to people, see what conversations are going on, like various stuff, and interact as a whole, and use that time to be on Twitter. But don't go on to Twitter to tweet. That would be my tip there.
It's that intentionality. And I think that's such a useful thing, even for people who aren't on Instagram or Twitter or things to generate revenue. Maybe you're just on there for entertainment. Still go on there with the intentionality to maybe check a few pages, read a few posts of people that you actually get value from. Whereas sometimes when we just pick it up, particularly if you're doing it during your working day, like I know that I'm phone free 9 till 12 during my kind of corporate job, because I'm really like high output at that point. And I know that if I just picked up my phone, it's purely as a distraction and it's not getting me any return on investment, even if it's LinkedIn. I'm pretending that I'm getting pretending that I'm going to get value from it. If I'm going on there to post, I'm going on there to post, and I like the scheduling tool. I think that's a nice little hack.
Yeah, it's been huge for me, and I think I can thank ProPain Fitness for that, because they've been great with that sort of stuff. They always say, when you make a piece of content, you make it once and you plan to use it again, so you can reuse it all the time. And that's the same with like online coaching as well. So once you've said something to someone, make sure it's available to everybody else. So once it's said once, you never need to say it again. And I think that's the same with Twitter. So if you've had an idea, make sure it's scheduled, post it, and then it kind of, because you can set automatic retweets, you can set things to follow up with ebooks or second tweets and stuff. So scheduling is a huge thing.
Yeah, a really useful hack there for anyone that's running online businesses and looking to still be active on socials. Last question in the kind of topic areas that we're going to look at, Nick, was around investing. Why do you think us fitness guys in recent years anyway have been so keen to dabble and to share what we're up to?
Don't know. This is a tough question. I guess it comes down to improving yourself, so your lifestyle. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I guess we've spoken about this briefly, and you think it's down to like the consistency and the continuing compounding of it, I guess.
I think a lot of us fitness guys are very process driven. And obviously the process has an aim, like you say, improvement of lifestyle, improvement of physique, improvement of financial freedom or spending power. And for me, like particularly for like kind of passive investing, so investing 10 to 15% of your salary in an ETF or a particular fund once a month, that's a process the same as cooking my meals on a Sunday or going for a walk every morning or weightlifting 5 days a week with a progressive plan. That's a process that I just tick off, and that my personality loves that. And I think there's hundreds, thousands of people who maybe listen to this that will be like, oh yeah, I really like that kind of stuff. But it seems that we are all talking about it a lot more than before.
Yeah. I think you're very right. I think you're probably very right about your ideas behind it there. I think maybe because we're interested in it as well, we're seeing a lot more people talking about it. It's like when you buy a red car, and guess what you see all these different red cars, don't you? So I think it definitely comes on your radar more, especially with social media now and the algorithms giving you what you really like. So I think there's definitely aspects of that. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's good that people are starting to invest and learn more about it. I've been impressed with, like, Joey D's just started up a financing channel, wasn't he? So he's transitioned well. Is it alongside his fitness stuff? I think he's doing it.
It's going to sit alongside it. Yeah, he was speaking about it on the podcast when he was on. He was really interesting guest actually, and yeah, he's really gone down the rabbit hole there. And it was actually him buying a house that prompted him to look at that, because he was. He'd be quite shy of saying, but he's been making excellent money for a couple of years now. But he was still surprised about how, like, he'd been putting his money into like a cash ISA basically as his saving. And he's like, that's a deposit for a house, but it'd gone backwards in the 2 years, 3 years he'd been saving just based on interest rates and inflation. So I think that's a really interesting point, where sometimes when we look to make a massive purchase, we realize actually my money's not been working in the background for me at all. In fact, it's regressing.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the rates now, what is it like? It's lower than 1% now, isn't it, for savings accounts now? At 0.5 or something like that. So I just think, if you are sensible, then you need to be looking at what you're going to do with your money. And it sounds like, Joey D's got it nailed there. But yeah, it's definitely been something that I'm interested in. I think I got interested in it when I initially left the performance project, and I had a bit of cash coming in that I hadn't had before. And I was thinking, okay, what do I now do with this money? I can't just let it sit around. And it's just about making those sensible decisions into what you invest it into.
Yeah, and one of those, you like to dabble in the crypto space. You're a big Bitcoin advocate. I'm a Bitcoin fan as well. Why crypto?
I think, it's I see it as a hedge against inflation, but it's not just Bitcoin that I'm interested in. I like the whole blockchain ecosystem, I guess you could call it, and DeFi as a whole. I just think the whole section is interesting. And we'll probably come on to my investings in a bit, but the way I invest in the future and innovation. And I think Bitcoin, blockchain, Ethereum are are that at the moment, and that's what really excites me.
Yeah, the hedge against inflation piece is a big part for me. I kind of view it a little bit as digital gold. And when I had two of my friends actually from Crypto Glasgow on the podcast, they're consultants in this space now full time. They're doing incredibly well. They were saying like view it as a digital gold, particularly Bitcoin, but then other cryptos like the altcoins is a bit more of a flyer for the future potentially, depending on where it goes. So I think that's an interesting take that you've got on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I've always just seen it as like a collector's item. It's just this really weird like switch in my head where when I'm investing into stocks, I see it as money. Whereas with blockchain or Bitcoin, I buy it and I think, okay, that's another collection from my store. That's another collection from my store. And don't ask me what I plan to do as a collection because I have no idea. But it's slowly improving over time, and I plan to hold on to it for as long as I can or need to, and just keep doing it that way. Whereas with stocks, I kind of have a buy and sell point in my head, whereas with Bitcoin, I don't. So I guess the word would be asset. So collect it like an asset, but I'd never in my head have like a sell point. So
yeah, you don't have a target. You're not like a trader. You're an investor. And I think most people that ever ask me about investing off the back of some of the podcasts that I've done in recent months, I'm very much like, well, I'm not going to point you in the direction of like trading YouTube channels or trading podcasts. I'm going to point you in the direction of like investment ones because that's what I favor. Like I don't have time to look at screens and charts and chart where a particular stock's going. Yeah, I'll pick the odd stock, but more often than not, it's pretty passive. What does your investment portfolio look like in terms of what's your exposure like? Where do you tend to look?
So, I mean, I've got probably about 10% in crypto. The rest of it's in more growth stocks. I've actually, I mean, I don't know how much your listeners and stuff know about what's going on in the stock market at the moment, but we're seeing a huge transition at the moment where tech's actually dropped quite a bit. And so I've been making a small switch, around 20% of my portfolio over to recovery stocks. So the stocks that we're going to see getting better over this period. Well, whilst everyone's getting scared about bonds and inflation increasing, we're seeing a lot of the work from home stocks or tech stocks come back down. And so we're seeing the other stocks increase a bit more. So mainly growth. I'm mainly growth.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you are the same, yeah.
Yeah, very similar. Although I think I'm a little bit more passive in terms of I have a larger percentage of my asset allocation in ETFs, like maybe like a tracker following the S&P 500, FTSE 250, and then on Vanguard, one that's kind of split between equities and bonds based on like my retirement date as well, which I find really useful. And I know a lot of my self-employed coaching friends treat that almost as their pension. They pop stuff into Vanguard and they're like,
yeah,
I'm going to retire at 60. I'm 30 now. Invest accordingly so I can access it in 30 years and have a better return than if it sat in my cash ISA, which for me made so much sense when they were talking about that. And they were heavily influenced by my episode with Andrew Craig, who's the author of How to Own the World, which is one of my favorite investment books in this space.
Yeah, I'm very similar. So I've got a SIP set up. So okay. I guess you've heard one of those. So self-invested pension fund. So I've set that up, and then I've got various ETFs and indexes that I put my money into that. So when I say my portfolio is more what I kind of play around with day to day. And then I've got my pension set up, which is ETFs and indexes, mainly just the S&P 500, where I put a small percentage of my monthly income as well for when I'm growing old.
Yeah. And I think for anyone listening to that's maybe some of that's a new concept too. There are some episodes in the archives. There's lots of good resources on YouTube, and equally, I think the more guys like me and you, Nick, Joey D, whoever else that are in good shape, like to lift weights in the fitness space, that are talking about these things, I think it's helpful because a lot of people previously maybe turned off. They're like, oh no, I couldn't possibly think about finance and money and investing. That's too complicated for me. And like, yes, hopefully we've come across as intelligent and well spoken here, but we're not the brains of Britain when it comes to finance, and it's just been a case of gradually learning it and getting through the information to action it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your investment strategy, sort of the passive investing where you are investing into indexes and ETFs and stuff, is a really good way for people to start. It's safe, and I mean, you are going to get some ups and downs, don't get me wrong, but that's part of investing. But the concept of it is really good, and you get on average 8% a year.
Yeah.
And so it's a really good way to save some money and look after your money.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I've absolutely loved this chat, and it was a nice note for us to wrap up on there when it comes to people taking action on putting themselves in a better financial position. For those that want to connect with you off the back of this, where would you like to direct them?
So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is Walshy Nick, so WALSHY Nick. They're probably the best platforms to find me.
Yeah, that'll both be linked in the show notes below. I'm sure you've all enjoyed this. If you have done, please take a screenshot, pop it on your Instagram story, tag Nick, tag myself at call.cambro, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.